Okay, so we're going to continue working on the selfie stick assembly. So just a reminder, we have turned off the stick top and stick bottom. If I turn on the 4 components that I hid, if I go home, you can see all of them. I'm going to go ahead and turn those bottom 4 back off. I'm going to hit home again. Now, just a reminder, we had grounded this piece. So in order to do the assembly, we always want one piece. And when we say grounded, we mean that that particular piece is going to stay static. It's going to stay within the thing. So if you grab one of these guys, you can move it around. But if I get this guy, it won't physically move. All the rest of them will actually move around. Now, I'm editing here at the top level. So if I click here, and then if I go down to the shoe top, then I can start to do some things with the individual, but let's just remain up here. So again, we have grounded this part here, and if you remember correctly, if you click here, right click on this guy, you can unground and ground. Unground and ground. So right now it is grounded, which means it has a little pin, so it's going to stay in that same relative position unless I go into the file and actually move that particular part around, editing that component. Okay, so we're going to make our first joint, and so in this case it's going to be a rigid joint. So I'm going to choose joint, and you're going to have some options. So when you click, you can actually have different joint types. We'll go through the lecture and talk about rigid, which is where it doesn't move. We're basically gluing it together. We have Revolute, which is revolving. We have slider, cylindrical, pin slot, planar, and then a ball joint. And so for right now, we're just going to pick rigid. Now, since we've grounded this guy, it's going to gray this guy out. So my first component is going to be the thing I'm going to move. So I'm going to move this part here, and I'm going to move it over. So in your component mode, you have some options as far as how you choose joints. So we're going to begin with this origin mode, and then what we're going to do is, this is our component 1. So I'm going to slide in here, and I have some options for what I choose. I can choose this end. I have another on the other end, and then the part that I want to choose for right now is this circle here. So once I have got that circle, I'm going to zoom back out, and then I'm going to go over here, and for my component 2, I'm going to select where I want to go to. So if I move this guy over and zoom in, I can see that I want to move it basically in that same part here. Okay. So as you can see, I'm kind of like, wow, that's kind of weird. That looks not how I intended it. And what you can kind of notice is that we basically have it inverted. So it went ahead and placed it where we wanted it, but it placed it basically backwards. So if I look over here, you do have the ability to offset. So if you'd like to offset it, you can change that. You could slide those guys around. So right now it's at 0, but if we wanted to maybe slide it on the other side, that's an option. But I don't. So I'm going to revert this Z offset back to 0. And then what I'm going to do is I simply want to flip it. So if I go here to this last option, choose flip, then it's going to flip around, and I can say okay. And so that is our first joint. Now it doesn't move. It's simply a rigid joint at that place. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to put together, is going to be, let's see here, what are we calling this? This is remember if I click on this is the shoe bottom, and this up here is the shoe top. So one thing which is kind of nice is kind of move things around and get them in their general order. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to take this guy here, and I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to flip it -180. And that way it's in the right rough position. So then what I can do is I want to move this guy over, and then I want to move this guy, and I'm just going to kind of move it down, and then we can move it around. All right, so now it's roughly at least in the right orientation and look in the right direction. So we're going to do the same. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to initiate a joint command. Now again, this is grayed out because this thing's grounded, so it can't be the first component that you pick. So I'm going to choose the back end of my box here, and I'm going to do the same rigid joint, And when I first click it, I'm going to do here. And what I'm going to see is I have some options about where I'm going to pick. And this is a nice point. Like there's actually a couple of different options, but this is a good one for me. So I'm going to pick that guy, and then I'm going to choose my box again. And then what I can do is for my second component, I'm going to hit select here, and I'm basically going to choose that same location. Then I'm going to hit OK. So there we have a rigid joint between the two. Okay, so now we're going to join the parts here. We have what is this? The stick adapter to the things that we've already assembled. Now, I'm kind of do the same thing. I'm going to move and just get this guy roughly kind of where we think it should be. So if I'm here, then I can move it forward, and I can move it over. So now it's roughly in the position that I can do there. So hold on one second. Okay, now that we have them in the same relative position, we're going to go in here, and I want to look at it from, let's see here, go one more. You can always just kind of go around like this direction. Going to do the same thing. Going to do a joint, except in this case we want to do something a little bit different. This isn't going to be a rigid joint. This is going to be something that's going to rotate. So we're going to check the Revolute. In the same way, we are going to select origin, and I'm going to zoom in here, and what I'm going to click on here is I want to pick that little guy right there. And then what I can do is I can move out, move in, and then for the second, select, let's zoom in, go right there. Okay, hit OK, and now what I can do is I can move that around. So we zoom out so you can see the full rotation. Now, at this point, Fusion does not have the ability to understand the fact that some of these are like solid bodies. So it'll go like, woo, it'll just go right through there. Okay, so we're going to kind of leave that right there. Now, the next bit it wants us to do is it wants us to insert a McMaster car part in the project lead away. So we are going to, let me go on real quick, hold on. Okay, so if I'm on step 6, it gives me the McMaster car component number. So I'm going to say insert, and if you look midway down, you have insert McMaster car component. Okay, we'll have to check and see if we have any issues with this, but here's the part number. We're looking for 91185 A911 Okay. Okay, and so per the instructions, it wants us to do a 3D step. So we're going to do 3D step and hit download. Okay, so that part is now in. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to want to orient it in the right direction. So, okay, so we're going to move it out. And then I would like to rotate it, say 90 degrees. 90. Okay. Then we can move it further out and then just kind of over. And so now we kind of got it in the rough position. Go ahead and hit OK. So then that brings in that additional plastic head thumb screw. Okay. So now in this case, we're not really, well, rigid's absolutely not in the cards for what we want to do. But also, if we just did a rotation, it wouldn't be an accurate model of what this thing actually does. So we're going to choose a new motion. So we're going to go ahead and select our motion. And so the motion instead of revolute is going to be called cylindrical. Now cylindrical is going to give you both a revolution, so it's going to rotate, but then it's also going to move along the axis. So it's actually going to kind of rotate and screw in and out. So go through position. We're going to do same thing. So we're going to kind of go in here, and I'm going to look at that circle there. Then for the second, I want to rotate around and grab snap and then select. There you go. And then go ahead and hit OK. So now what that's going to do is as it rotates, it's going to go in and out. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to zoom back out, get over here so we can see some things and bring it back in. So I want to bring in the phone holder top, and I want to bring in the phone holder bottom. Now, I believe there are already some joints already established for this guy, but what we're going to do is we're going to select the whole thing, and then we're going to select move copy. Now I'm going to go ahead and rotate this guy to the position of kind of where I want it to be. So grab this, and I'm going to go 90 degrees. Oh, and I moved too soon, so I'm going to go and select this whole thing again, and I'm going to move it. And then my intent is I just want to go ahead and move it over in to the location that we want. Oh, and it's kind of in this weird place. All right, we're just going to live with it where it's at. Can do it from there. So, okay, now selecting the motion for this one, kind of interesting. So you do see the fact that you do have thread. So the intent is this is going to be assembled, but for when we're operating the device, when we're operating the selfie stick, we're not actually going to like use that as a joint. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to use a rigid joint. So if I go motion instead of cylindrical, I'm going to hit rigid. Go back to the position, select my first one. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to select that outer circle, and then I'm going to flip around my design, kind of drag this guy down, and then what I'll do is I'm going to look for that there and hit OK. Now, if I zoom back out, oh, okay, I see what happened. All right, so we've got a joint out here that's doing some weird stuff. So we're gonna have to address that. We're gonna see how this thing works. But I think what we're gonna have to do is that joint went weird. So in my case, I'm going to delete that particular. I'm gonna delete that particular guy there, and I'm gonna add a joint back in here. Okay, so if you moved your parts and they actually retained the sliding motion, then you know what to do this step. This is just like a correction thing. So somehow when I moved things around, the joint got lost with it. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I chose from a motion perspective, let's see here, slider. And if I go back here, select position on my first part, I'm going to choose that center part there. And then I'm going to kind of move my view around. I'm going to zoom in, and what I'm going to choose is I'm going to choose that guy there and hit OK. So now if I zoom back out and then move my cube around, hopefully this thing slides in and out. And there you go. Now again, it doesn't really understand the fact that you really can't make things phase through other parts, and we'll work on those later. But at least this gets us all onto the same page. Now I'm going to zoom back out. And then I'm going to turn back on the stick top and the stick bottom. And so those guys are over here. Okay, so the same thing. I'm going to grab all of this, make sure I don't leave any joints behind. Just going to move it. And what I want to do is I'm just going to move this guy down here so that everything is kind of in the same place. And remember, you can always turn grids off and on. So if I can turn this guy off, it gives me a little bit clearer. Oh, and see, all my joints stayed behind. So let me undo that, and then I'm just going to move all these guys over to this direction. Okay, so with these guys, I'm going to move these guys. Move these guys this way, and then move them up. Hit OK. All right. So now, if you see, these guys also have threading, but for what we're going to do, you're not going to disassemble the selfie stick during its like normal operation. So I'm going to do joint again. Motion is going to be not slider, it's going to be rigid. I'm going to go ahead and go in here. I'm going to pick this outside edge of the threading. Go ahead and kind of move things around. Then I'm going to zoom in for the second guy, component 2. I'm going to go in here and select that outer ring. And now it has the stick going through. So I'm going to use that flip technique. And I'm going to go ahead and flip that around. And then hit OK. So there we go. All right. And then the last bit we got here. Okay, for the last part, what we're going to do is I am going to select joint again. Now this time I'm going to do a slider because this is the selfie stick that's actually going to go up and down. So I'm going to choose, let's see here, from a position standpoint, I'm going to select, go ahead and select this inside. And then for the second piece, because in the collapse position, I sort of want it up here. So I'm going to zoom in here and select that guy there. Now, same thing. It's kind of inverted, or actually not kind of, actually is. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it and hit OK. Now, once it saves and kind of moves out, then what I should be able to see here is this thing should slide up and down. This guy's going to move in and out. Now, again, it doesn't have the concept of limits, so it'll go cruising right through the rest of the assembly, and we are going to address that here in a few minutes. Okay, so now we have everything kind of set up for the next piece of the puzzle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to view, let's see here, let's turn this guy like that. And so all I've done is I've oriented this thing where I'm looking at it from the front. And then what I can do is click on the middle and say, set this current view as the front. And that way, let's see here, let's see if it picked it up. Yep. And so now this will make it a little more understandable as far as what we have going on. Now I'm going to expand the screen out here a little bit. We'll see what happens here. But the other, actually, no, we'll expand it up. And then the other thing you can always do is through object visibility, you can actually take off the joints. So if I go up here, go down here and say object visibility and say joints and take that off, it'll take those joints out, and that way you can kind of get to see what the object, kind of looks like. So that concludes this portion of the program of just getting the selfie stick assembled. In the next video, we're going to talk about setting realistic limits so that your selfie stick operates kind of in a way that you would think it actually would. All right, so there you go.